Hi everybody, John Han with the Pulsing Cinema, and the Pulsing Cinema movie of the day is Oliver Stone's JFK from 1991. Oliver Stone at that point was on a roll, because Oliver Stone of the mid to late 80s to early 90s had talk radio, Platoon, Born the 4th of July, The Doors. Oliver Stone had established himself as almost kind of like the cinematic biographer of his era, illuminating the Vietnam War and popular music and controversy, politics, all these hot button issues here. And the assassination of JFK was absolutely a hot button issue, and the film to this day, JFK, controversial depending upon where you are on the political spectrum, is where you are as far as your belief of the Warren Commission and their official verdict of JFK's assassination, that the JFK was assassinated by a lone nut, Lee Harvey Oswald, in the Texas Book Depository with Manlica Carcano. A few shots. He runs out, kills a policeman, runs into the movie theater, and then is, whatever, a couple days later is dispatched by Jack Ruby. JFK is a film about New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison, the real-life character played in the film by Kevin Costner. Jim Garrison begins to what he sees as a conspiracy from a New Orleans businessman, Clay Shaw, to David Ferry, who have links to Jack Ruby and Oswald, and he slowly begins to uncover this conspiracy to assassinate JFK with collusion from the CIA, from Central Intelligence, from parts of the military-industrial complex who want to silence JFK and want to continue the war in Southeast Asia. So to escalate the Vietnam War and what have you. So again, no matter how you feel about all of these political events, what Oliver Stone says he was trying to do with JFK was not necessarily get everything correct, but create a kind of what he calls a counter myth. A myth to the Warren Commission, the magic bullet theory, all of these explanations. He wanted to create a counter myth of, what if there was a much larger conspiracy to assassinate the president. And it's very interesting. It's an interesting idea to think of. And there are a lot of puzzling, events surrounding the JFK assassination. The number of witnesses who met foul play very early on. The fact that the Warren and the government and Time Life suppressed the Zapruder film for so many years. All of these things kind of add up and they create suspicion in people's minds. But up until, the late 80s and the early 90s, before Oliver Stone's JFK, the assassination was beginning to kind of fade in the public consciousness. In the late 60s and the early 70s, there was this paranoia and the idea that there could be assassination, the Watergate paranoia and the cultural upheaval of the era. Everything was being questioned, and the official story of JFK was being questioned, and people like Jim Garrison, who were doing college tours and showing the Zapruder film and showing it out. Again, there was this public consciousness about this possibility kind of fomenting, but it was very paranoid, it was very underground, and it was kind of underground, kind of outsider thoughts. And now JFK comes along, Oliver Stone's 1991 film, a Warner Brothers film, a Hollywood studio film, but kind of legitimizing a lot of these ideas and theories, and it definitely changed the public's consciousness. I mean, if you think about a film that changed the way people think, changed the way the public thought of something, thought about history. I mean, JFK is way up there. It's a very powerful piece of filmmaking. A powerful piece of filmmaking which, the origins of the style and the structure of JFK, of course it was, again, I mean, Oliver Stone had kind of been developing this kind of filmmaking, of course, when he made The Doors, but that's more of a traditional film, but there is some experimental stuff in that. Robert Richardson is a very adventurous cameraman, director of photography. And of course, Oliver Stone would continue with this kind of, lots of, strange cuts, shooting on different film formats, going from black and white to color to animation to all types of stuff. This would kind of reach a crescendo, a climax in his Natural Born Killers film. But it really just blows it wide open on JFK. And the origins of that type of kind of documentary type film style and the cutting, of course, it goes back to the paranoid films of the 60s and 70s, the experimental paranoid films of the 60s and 70s, like Kostagov versus Z, about political assassination in Turkey. And I mean, that's a great film, and you see a lot of stuff, a lot of the ideas, and and also the French film of the 60s and 70s, Gio Pontecorvo's Battle of Algiers, which is a film about Algiers and the terrorism in Algiers. It's a black and white film that looks like a documentary film, but there is completely not a documentary film. It's a completely dramatic film. Every frame of that film is not documentary, but it has this sense of realism, unlike any other film made before or since, really. It's an incredible film re-released a few years ago, and the Blu-ray and DVD has interviews with Oliver Stone where he expresses his admiration for the film. So you can really see in the and of course the Francesco Rosi and the Italian films, and so the European paranoid films of the 60s and 70s, and then the kind of French New Wave stuff of just breaking all the rules. All of this stuff came to fruition in JFK, which has all of that background, all of that experimental 60s and 70s filmmaking, the, question authority, all of this stuff, the counterculture stuff, but it's also a big Hollywood film. So so it's a very bona fide, film, which again has all of these all of this weird experimental baggage to it. So it's a very unique film in that way. And not too many films that, kind of like look like that film does, and that was again as far as it freed the public's mind, as far as think about these conspiracy theories, maybe for the good and for the bad, because there was a lot of wacky stuff in the early 90s, a lot of conspiracy theories, not just as far as JFK, but Elvis is alive and all that. Well, I guess that was late 80s, but the Elvis is alive stuff, JFK is alive, and all of these kind of crazy wacky conspiracy stuff. I mean, of course, that is the legacy of JFK as well. But then also, the unsealing of a lot of the files related to JFK, the Freedom of Information Act. A lot of that stuff came out, and continues to come out to this day. There is this idea that we'll never know exactly what happened with JFK, and was he assassinated, and if he was there, if there was a conspiracy, who were involved, who were the conspirators. But we may. I mean, there is always hope. There is always things, documents every year. There's new stuff that comes out, new documentation, new ideas. It is sadder that every year kind of that passes by, people die. The people involved, the first-hand parties kind of pass away. But I mean that's life. But there still is hope. There still is hope. But I mean, after JFK, you see films that are, Hollywood films, like Warner Brothers, like Three Kings and stuff, that is very experimental, shooting on different film stocks and doing very weird, exotic things. And really, JFK was one of those films that kind of was like, cleared the path for that in some ways, of being able to do these really exotic, weird, experimental films, but have it be a major studio film. I definitely think there is a bit of a legacy, a path, which JFK forged for that type of film. The film itself, I mean, I saw it when I was very young. My dad took me to it in a very big theater in Pensacola, Florida. It was the Bayou Boulevard Cinema. It was one of the grand old theaters in Pensacola. Not the oldest, but probably the oldest theater that still kind of stayed on into the early to mid 90s. The late 90s really as well, but it got kind of dirty and filthy. I think the last film I saw there was Blues Brothers 2000, but I saw Alien 3 there. I saw Speed. I saw all kinds of films, Hellraiser 3, Hardware, all kinds of films the film made a big impression on me as a watcher, as someone interested in film. The film was just full of different techniques, as I said, and wonderful performance. A performance by Kevin Costner channeling Jimmy Stewart, just the everyman, and the reality of Jim Garrison as a New Orleans DA politician, living in New Orleans in the 50s and the 60s, and the smear campaigns that were associated with Garrison and the white all of the white power movement, the thing that he was involved with, the KKK and the political corruption, all of this stuff, all of the background kind of trying to smear and invalidate some of the stuff and the things he uncovered, and the weirdness that involved in Clay Shaw, Clay Bertrand, Dean Andrews. And again, I'm throwing out a lot of stuff that maybe if you're not familiar with the whole conspiracy scene is hard to grasp. But the film, really, the film lays it out. The film is very logical. The film, I think, from what I've read, it is a very logical, very well-researched film. You may disagree with the conclusions that the characters make in the film, but otherwise very logical, very well-balanced film that kind of just says, here are all the players. Here is what this guy Jim Garrison uncovered, and this is what it is, And what players? As I said, I want to go back to everybody in the film. I mean, I love Costner's performance. He's one of the great American actors, I think, and this is one of the great American performances. I mean, just the everyman, the Jimmy Stewart, the little guy who attacks the big guy, and then Clay Shaw, Tommy Lee Jones, the raw, aggressive eccentricity, the power, and then the humor of Joe Pesci as Dave Ferry, and the eccentricity. Dave Ferry was a very smart guy. Was a very brilliant guy. But he was such an eccentric weirdo. He had alopecia. He was hairless. He was a priest who was defrocked. He was involved in the gay scene in New Orleans in the 50s and the 60s, and he was a pilot, and he was a researcher. And I mean, the Dave Ferry movie. I mean, I think Oliver Stone in the commentary says, like, the David Ferry is such a weird and wild character that it's like you could do a whole movie about him. The life of David Ferry. He lived 10 lives. But I mean, weird stuff. And then all of the Jim Garrison's researchers, like, who are really combinations of different people and real people, but, of course, J.O. Sanders and Julie Metcalf, and then Michael Rooker as kind of the guy who betrays Jim Garrison. Very interesting character actor. And Michael Rooker, gained prominence from Henry, A Portrait of a Serial Killer, and Oliver Stone on the commentary track notes that, you know, that's what caught his eye, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. And then also the hitchhiker from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is also in this film. He has a little cameo as one of the guys in Dallas, you know, one of these mysterious FBI people in Dallas. So this is kind of like a Texas Chainsaw type of a horror film type, a reunion type film, you know. It's like Oliver Stone in Dallas, you know, casting his favorite horror movie actors in a way, you know. So I mean, yeah, I mean, and the recreations, we again using all of that, the technical prowess and the multiple film formats, 16, Super 8, and 35 millimeter, shooting on Dallas, very interesting technique and form, and the film is like over 2 hours. It feels like a breeze. To me, you feel the rising conspiracy, and I guess it might be like nails on a chalkboard if you completely disagree with everything. If you have this, like the American press, this kind of radical hatred, or you know, just dislike, just totally, you know, of the Jim Garrison narrative. You know, if you just totally dismiss everything of Jim Garrison's, I think it might be a painful experience. But if you're open to it, I think it's a incredibly well-made film. And again, it was a film that could only be made because, you know, Oliver Stone had so many successes up to this point, and this was the film. Made it very quickly in a short period of time so he wouldn't be interfered with. Oh man, Oliver Stone, I guess, and then released in a director's cut on home video with some additional scenes. You know, there's a scene in the airport where they try to frame Jim Garrison. They try to photograph him in an airport with a guy. Echoes of you know, another airport sexual hijink mishap recently, which was probably not a work of political hijinks or framing, but who knows, really. Who knows in life what is real and what is Memorex, you know, these days. The reality from the fiction, the framing, you know, again. I'm going to put on my Alex Jones, you know, Prison Planet hat here, but my little tinfoil hat. But in any case, beyond the conspiracy, beyond the paranoia, beyond the feverish counter-myth, there is Oliver Stone's JFK, a film from 1991, full of great performances, I think, and a great performance, and a little performances by, you know, Donald Sutherland as Mr. X, doing this, you know, it seems like 20-minute, 15-minute just laying out, you know, this dialogue scenes and just going. I mean, that's an amazing little feat that he's able to keep, you know, your interest as an audience for just doing just this monologue, you know. So a film full of great performances by people like Donald Sutherland, Michael Rooker, and Julie Metcalf, and Joe Pesci, and of course headed by Costner. An experimental form, multi-formats inspired by the counterculture of the 60s and 70s. And then really, you know, a film which is an inspiration politically, an inspiration technologically, an inspiration to fight the power, to fight the cinematic power, to fight the political power, to find your own truth, to find your own way. A beacon in many ways, a beacon of greatness, I think. Oliver Stone's JFK, a real great film, and I love it.